Hello everyone, my name is Sniping is Fun, and I welcome you back to my next video on my YouTube channel, my next top 10 list on my YouTube channel. And it's another top 10 video game list. It's a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a while because since gaming's inception, this has been an ongoing trend with a lot of video games for one reason or another. A lot of video game companies and their franchises or whatever games for one reason or another. Sometimes financial, sometimes fan support, sometimes whatever. But sometimes there are certain video games in the gaming industry that get one-off appearances and we never see them again. And so that being said, today's video is going to be my top 10 one-off video games that deserve a continuation. They deserve a sequel at some point in time. They still do, even though some of the games on this list came out forever ago. So without further ado, without this intro going on way too long, let's get this list started with number 10. And for some of you out there, this game was fairly decent back in the day during the 6th generation, during the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox. I remember renting this game, and it was a fun game. And they never went anywhere with it, and that's Freedom Fighters. It was essentially a third-person shooter, somewhat tactical kind of game where you went around the map, each level, and you would, order on like freedom fighter soldiers to join your cause, and you can tell them stand your ground, go and attack, defend, stuff like that. And it was released in 2003, and it was about like the Soviet Union coming to America, taking over America, and about underground freedom fighter warriors standing up and winning the country back. It was cheesy, but it was really, really fun. It was a pretty decent game. It had multiplayer where you could do 2v2, where two people could be America, two people could be the Soviet Union. And you can get soldiers and go at each other and attack each other for points and stuff like that. It was fun multiplayer-wise. And the story was actually fairly decent for a game that was released in 2003, back before a lot of video game storytelling really, really took off, which, it would say there's a lot of good storytelling in 80s and 90s games. But later on in the 2000s, when a lot of game companies really went too far and really, really started pushing that, it was actually a pretty interesting game for that generation. It was fun on all of them. I remember playing it on Xbox, playing it on GameCube, playing it on the PS2. I always remember playing it with my friends and family members. It was a good multiplayer game back then, and I remember beating this game at least twice, and Freedom Fighters was just a really, really fun game. And I'm surprised that it never got anything. I'm assuming it's because it didn't do well, or maybe the company I forgot who even made Freedom Fighters, but I loved Freedom Fighters a lot, and I'd love for them to do another game. The only problem is, what would you go with a storytelling now? Because back then it was pretty much like very, very early post 9/11, so doing a storyline like that probably made some sense. But I would wonder what you would do with Freedom Fighters now. That's the reason why I'm kind of questioning ever bringing it back. But I do think it should happen, and I would love to see it happen because it was one of my favorite games that generation. So Freedom Fighters should come back. Number 9 is going to go to a somewhat I wouldn't say underground, but like it's kind of underrated 3DS game that was fine. I think it's a Nintendo game, probably second party, because it had Fire Emblem characters in it, and it was fairly fun, and it did have Nintendo's backing, and that's Codename Steam, which is pretty much like a tactical game, like a Fire Emblem, like an Advance Wars, like a Disgaea, like a Final Fantasy Tactics or whatever, so where you move your units around there, you only get so long to move them, and it takes place at a time where it's like freaking Abe Lincoln and all these like historical figures and like legendary characters in this time getting these mech suits and saving the world. They're like a hero team that saves the world, and you can get like Marth on your team and whatnot. I think that was the first game where Marth had an English voice actor on it too. Before we started getting that English voice, I think in Fire Emblem, I think that was the first time they ever gave him an English voice. Codename Steam was a fun as hell game. And I'm surprised if it has any connection to Nintendo, why they never got any more games done. The only thing that I could think of for a game like that is it did not do well. It didn't have a brand name to it like a Fire Emblem. When people know Nintendo for Fire Emblem, they know Nintendo for Advance Wars and stuff like that. Those or stuff like this guy, Final Fantasy Tactics and the like. Codename Steam was a new IP that came out of nowhere. It was fun, but that doesn't necessarily help it sell really well because the name brand probably didn't do it that much justice. And some people just looked at it just as probably just a throwaway 3DS game, which it was definitely not that. It was definitely probably one of the best 3DS games ever released. I'd put it on a top 25, 50 list somewhere. It would be up there. It was fun. It definitely, I would love to see them go back and tackle that with more, moving the story forward, having more like legendary historical figure type people come in and like, oh, we're part of the superhero defense force team and all this stuff. And it's just like, it was fun. Anyone out there that actually ever played Codename Steam, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Would you like to see another game? Because I thought that was a fun 3DS game, and we never got to see that come out. And that came out in like anything else past that game. That game came out, I think, in like I was still in college when it came out. Like 2013, I think it came out ish. 2013, 14. Yeah, but I would like to see it. I really would like to see it. And if Nintendo has any control over that, I would love to see something on the Switch or something. Even them just doing an updated HD version of it would be nice. I would just like to see that IP just die. It was interesting. Number 8 is going to go to a Suda51 franchise, and it's probably not the one you are thinking, even though I was highly thinking that franchise for this list. But this is more of a personal one, and that's Lollipop Chainsaw. That game came out in 2012. It was fun as hell. I mean, I already love the No More Heroes franchise from Suda51 and Grasshopper Studios. But Lollipop Chainsaw, which is a big action adventure kind of level-based game where you play as Juliet Starling, taking on zombie monsters and evil god-like demonic figures and everything. And it had the Suda51 charm. I mean, I know people are going to want to say Killer 7, but for me personally, I have more of an affiliation with Lollipop Chainsaw, and I would love to see Lollipop Chainsaw get another game, especially now that the way Suda51 is actually doing his games. It's kind of coming together that all, if not most of these games share a similar universe, like the likes of Killer 7 and Shadows of the Damned all fit into the No More Heroes timeline. All of it's in almost the same universe. Killer's Dead probably in there too somewhere. Silver Briefcase, I think, might be too. I'm not fully sure. So I'm assuming Lollipop Chainsaw is somewhere in that universe, so it'd be cool to see a new game of that and then a crossover with her and Travis or something. That'd be really freaking awesome. And anyone that has played Lollipop Chainsaw knows the game was just crazy, wacky fun. If you played Suda51, you know exactly where his games can go. And I had a whole hell of a lot of fun with that game. That was like one of my earliest PS3 games too, because I got a PS3 super late. And I got that game on like a sale at freaking Best Buy. I love that game. I played that game for hours just to beat it. And then when I first got it. Now, we're going to get to number 7. And this is going to be a very off-the-wall choice, especially because the company that made this game is completely full stupid. And I've said, you know exactly, because if you know, I've watched my videos before, I've mentioned this company numerous times because they're goddamn stupid. But this, and also the fact that this game is probably, out of all the games on this list somewhere, it's probably the oldest title on it. And that's Sunset Riders. It's Contra meets the Old West. All those cool cowboy characters, Billy, Steve, Bob, and Cormano. Why did they never make another one? They did Contra up the ass. They did Contra like crazy. There was a million Contra games, but Sunset Riders comes out, gets one game in the arcades in I think the late 80s. It comes out on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo in the early 90s, and nothing. And on top of the fact that it's Konami, and everyone knows Konami is a bunch of idiots. They do jack all nowadays at all, like nothing. Nothing with Silent Hill, nothing with Metal Gear, nothing with freaking Contra, except for that one game that they didn't even make themselves that came out on the Switch and it sucked. And that came out on everything else too, I think. I would love to see Sunset Riders. Sunset Riders was one of my favorite games growing up on the Super Nintendo. I loved that game. It was the music, the atmosphere. I grew up with Sunset Riders. I didn't grow up with Contra. I grew up with Sunset Riders. I grew up with a bunch of Konami games, but I never grew up with Contra. I grew up with Sunset Riders and like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Tournament Fighters, and stuff like that. And Sunset, it's just like it's off the wall and out of nowhere. But they did do that Sunset Riders like arcade thing, like the arcade treasures thing, in the arcade play or whatever it was. They came out like a year and a half ago on like PS4 and Switch and Xbox and everything. Arcade Archives. So if they could do that and give us the HD version, like an arcade version of that, I would love to see a new one. The only problem is it's under Konami's rule and their control, and Konami does jack all nowadays. But I know some of you, come on, come in the conversation. Would you buy another Sunset Riders if it had at least if it had the quality of the original? I mean, that has to come with it. They can't just do a throwaway title that means nothing. It has to be good. So there's that. And we are on to number 6. And this one is a game I would love to see come back, and like it's like a cult following type of a game. It came out in the 90s, and then they did an HD remaster of it in the 2000s. And I only played it recently. I only played it last year. It came out like 95. But that game would be Full Throttle. A point-and-click adventure game, Full Throttle, freaking by Double Fine Games. You know, the likes of they made numerous games, Psychonauts, and another game you're going to see later on down this list, because Double Fine and all that stuff made some really good games. So, Full Throttle. It had freaking Mark Hamill as the villain. It's a biker gang thing with this big storytelling. A lot of good voice actors in the 90s voice acting scene. And a big point-and-click adventure game. And I played it to completion last year because I did it for the Xbox Live, the Xbox Gamer Score Challenge I did last February. It's been almost a year for that now. But I played that, and I loved it. And it was such a good game. The storytelling, the characters, the music, the atmosphere, the art style. And there was supposed to be a sequel, apparently. Numerous times, I think in the late 90s, early 2000s, there's artwork, all this stuff talked about Full Throttle 2 ever coming out. And it never came to fruition. Me, as a fan of the game now, all these years later, I didn't grow up with it like a lot of you gamers out there did. A lot of other gamers did that made it the cult classic, underrated title it really was. But I played it now, and I loved it. And I'd love to see them do a sequel. But the problem is now, with all these years later, would it still have the same quality? And that's what also concerns me with a lot of games on this list, is a lot of these games haven't come out in a long damn time. And the way gaming goes now, like some game companies rush their games out, some game companies take goddamn forever. There's a bunch of patches, there's a bunch of this, in the game development, who's running these companies, and what decisions they make on their games. It's kind of a crazy Wild West almost right now. So it leaves me concerned, but like all these games I would love to see come back. And Full Throttle is definitely one of them. We are in the top 5 now. And this game came out early GameCube. Has been, I think the license has been, reapplied for multiple times, but the company never did anything with it. And it keeps coming out, and people want to see a new one. Even one of my coworkers talks about they want to see another game in this series, and that's Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. It came out early GameCube when Nintendo had Rare. And Silicon Knights, I think, did the game too, I forgot now. I never actually played the Eternal Knights, but I keep hearing about how great, like, psychological horror and stuff, all the elements of it actually are. I'd like to go back and actually buy it one day and play it. But it's like look at all the craziness they did in that game. How much of an underrated gem of a classic game that is. Like, it's a hidden gem on the GameCube. It's a lot of people talk about how that's probably one of the best games on the GameCube, and it was such a good horror, survival, psychological kind of game, but they never did anything with it. That game came out in 2002, 2003? And they never did anything, but Nintendo has redone the license for it numerous times. Are they going to just HD remaster it? Or are they going to get someone to do a sequel? They technically own the IP. It is Nintendo's franchise. Why aren't you doing something with it? Number 4. Number 4 is going to go to... It's probably going to be one of the few games on this list that's more recent. But it's not super recent, but it is 2 generations ago now. Yeah, 2 generations ago. The Wii. And this game was one of 3 games that people were fighting and clamoring for massively back in the day, 2011, 2012, 2013, in Operation Rainfall. And that's the last story. And I know Hironobu Sakaguchi, I think he's went on record saying he did not want to make this into a new Final Fantasy where it keeps getting new entries. But the last story was so damn good. It was such a good freaking game. It deserves a sequel. It deserves at least one more game. It actually at least deserves a freaking HD remaster on the Switch, please. Sakaguchi, please, please. People fought so hard because that game never was originally supposed to come out into America. It was in Japan, and I think it went to Europe, and then Operation Rainfall happened. I remember doing that during college, and we finally got that. Pandora's Tower, Xenoblade Chronicles. I want to see this last story get some sort of a continuation. I mean, I'd be satisfied with them just doing an HD remaster on Switch, but if we can get a new actual game, that would be freaking goddamn cool. And at least one more. I'm not saying do Final Fantasy with Hironobu Sakaguchi, but do at least one more. It should be a duology or something. You could probably, even if it's new characters. We're in the top 3. And this game, out of this list, is the only one that technically does have a sequel, but it's technically by a different name, and it's technically not even technically connected to the story of it, I think, because I've never played the second game, but I played the first, and I know it's technically connected. It's made by the same company. It has the same characters, but the way the story goes in the first one, I don't know how that game could actually connect to it, and that's Mad World. I know Anarchy Reigns is technically a sequel to Mad World, but really it's not, because technically it's, first off, it's a different style game, even though it's a beat 'em up just like that, like a beat 'em up kind of thing. But like a lot of the characters that you kill in that game come back to life and are still in Anarchy Reigns, and the story doesn't continue. I want to see an actual continuation of Mad World in the same art style, where it's like the black and white Sin City art style, where the only color you see is red because blood. You know, I just want to see. It was so, the music. And I'm not a big. I'm sure as hell not a big hip hop rap guy. I am way more in the rock, metal, and punk. But I would love to see more of that because I love the soundtrack. I actually, with some hip hop and rap music, I actually kind of like. And Mad World, awesome. Number 2 is going to go to that other Double Fine game, and that's Brutal Legends. Jack Black, I think, has went on record saying he wanted to make a sequel, and I think there was rumors for a long time of him making a sequel. It's a pretty damn good game on PS3 and 360. Why can't we get another Brutal Legends? The music was awesome. Like I said, I'm more of a rock metal guy, and it's freaking awesome. It has Jack Black as the main character. A lot of good voice acting in that game, just like freaking Full Throttle. Brutal Legends, please. I don't even go on further with this response. Brutal Legends deserves a sequel, please. And before we get to number 1, we have a couple honorable mentions that I want to talk about right here. Threads of Fate. It was a cool RPG game back on the PS1. It was kind of an action adventure kind of one. I forgot who made it, but the game was so fun. It was so cool. It just had a good atmosphere to it. PlayStation also has Battle Royale. PlayStation needs to get their act together and make another Smash clone that actually is better, because that first one was... the roster wasn't all that great, and the gameplay just didn't feel good, because a lot of us went into it wanting to play Smash Brothers and we did against Smash Brothers. Pokemon Conquest. Pokemon meets Nobunaga's Ambition. That game was freaking amazing. Why haven't we got a sequel? It's been years. Bully. It's been rumored forever. Why haven't we got a new Bully? L.A. Noire. That was a good game. It really was a really good game. Sunset Overdrive. Another really good game that we never got anything else for it. Radiant Historia, good RPG on the 3DS. I know we got like an HD remaster of it or so on the Switch and whatnot, but I want a sequel. God Hand, Capcom, God Hand, awesome action-y game, God Hand. Phantom Brave, that was a fun non-Disgaea game, and I actually got into that game before I ever played a Disgaea. And Eternal Sonata, because more RPGs are always good, and that one was a clever, off-the-wall, cool, original one. And number 1, drum roll, please. The number 1 franchise, one-off game that I think deserves a sequel and deserves a new game is The Legend of Dragoon. That classic RPG game back on the PS1 that people and everyone, it was such a, I wouldn't even say it's a hidden gem, but people have been wanting a new game from it forever. And I never fully played the game, but I loved what I did play of it, and that was during the time when I started getting into RPGs. It was like the PS1 era and like the late Game Boy Color era with Pokemon and whatnot. The Legend of Dragoon is such a cult classic. They were about to put Dart in freaking PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, and they freaking pulled out the last second. And people have been clamoring for a remake. They've been clamoring for a sequel. And supposedly there's a rumor that they're doing a remake of it. But they need to do that and then jump forward to make a new game after all these years. But if they can do a remake, that'd be freaking awesome. It's just an RPG that deserves more love and more people playing it. And I don't think enough people played it back in the day, which is probably the reason why they didn't do anything with it. With that being said, that's my top 10 one-off games that deserve a sequel. Number 10, Freedom Fighters. Number 9, Codename Steam. Number 8, Lollipop Chainsaw. Number 7, Sunset Riders. 6, Full Throttle. 5, Eternal Darkness. 4, The Last Story. 3, Mad World. 2, Brutal Legends. And 1, The Legend of Dragoon. All those honorable mentions. This is the list for you all to see in front of me right now. And with that being said, my name is Snipe Is Fun. Peace. Please subscribe if you want to. Have a lovely day. And put in the comment section, what one-off games do you want to see eventually get a sequel to? And how much percentage chance do you actually see that happening? Because sadly to say, as much as I want all the stuff, we'll probably get 1 or 2 of these max. And that's it. My name is Snipe Is Fun. See you all later in the next list. Bye, everyone.